Welcome back to the conversation here on TYT. I'm your sometimes host, Francesca Fiorentini. Hope you're doing well. We have such a great guest for you. His name is Jason Harrow. He's the executive director of Equal Citizens, which is an organization that is launching a new initiative about a very old problem I know everyone is very concerned about, the Electoral College. The campaign's called Fix the College, and Jason's here to talk to us about it. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Francesca, how are you?
Good, how you doing? Tell us about this campaign. I know that it was spurred because of the recent Supreme Court decision. Tell us about the decision.
Yeah, so the decision actually took years to get here. It arose from the 2016 election. And the question was, who are these members of the Electoral College, these 538 mysterious presidential electors? Do they have a constitutional right to vote for whoever they want as president, including maybe someone other than Donald Trump or Joe Biden this year in 2020? Or are they bound to the vote of whoever wins the most vote in the state? And this question was unsettled, believe it or not, for several hundred years of our history. The Supreme Court answered it last week in a decision that said people can be bound. They can essentially be robots. They have to vote for who the people tell them to vote for. And that's right. I understand the instinct of that, but I think many people read that decision and said, well, what's the point of the Electoral College?
Right, and yeah, right. So this was a 9-0 decision, which is pretty, I mean, that tells you something right out of the gate, right? Like this is unanimous on the Supreme Court that states should be able to vote with their people and essentially get behind the popular vote rather than be forced to go with where their electors want to vote, if I'm understanding that correctly. And were you surprised by the decision, first of all, about that? Like I thought that the Electoral College was a little more controversial than that.
I was somewhat surprised, but not totally. And what I mean by that is that I think if you look at the Constitution and you think about the system that the framers of the Constitution thought we would have, never envisioned this system where only a few states matter and there's this winner take all rule where if you win by 1 vote or 1 million, you get all of the electors in a state. And what that means is only a few states get campaign visits, only a few states matter. And as viewers know, we're hearing all about Pennsylvania, Florida, Wisconsin, California, New York, Alabama. Doesn't matter for the presidential election.
Right.
That's not the system the framers envisioned. But I do think people are used to the current system. So it was always going to be a little bit of a tough lift to convince a majority of the Supreme Court justices to say, hey, when people go to the polls, they're actually only voting for these presidential electors, not for president. And if they have some other idea about who to vote for, they can do it. So that wasn't entirely unexpected.
Yeah. And okay, so just for the people in the back, what is wrong with the Electoral College?
Well, there's so much wrong, I think, in the way it's implemented. And that's the key, right? There's the idea of an electoral college, the idea that we have this indirect method of election and that maybe some small states should get a little bonus. That's actually not, I don't think, a terrible idea. It's probably not the way we would do it today, but actually, small states are sort of on both sides of the political issue right now. For every North and South Dakota that's sort of big and rural, there's a Vermont or a Delaware that's sort of small and on the East Coast and maybe more liberal. So that aspect of the Electoral College is actually not so bad. What I think is really broken with the way we select the president is this winner take all system where California, where you and I are remotely talking from, out of play, right? Everyone understands it's going to go for Joe Biden. Oklahoma, out of play. Everyone understands it's going to go for Donald Trump. And I don't think anyone would create a system where large majorities of voters are just irrelevant to the whole presidential election. So that's really the fundamental problem.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know, can you just briefly explain the 3/5 compromise? Because I think that, for me, is one of the biggest reasons why we need to reform the Electoral College. What is that?
Yeah, so that was a compromise made at the convention in that summer of 1787 when our Constitution was written, long time ago. And obviously in 1787 there was lots of slaveholding, and many people who wrote the Constitution were indeed slaveholders, and they were negotiating among themselves about how to divvy up the power of the national government. And what the Southern states said, and this is really, tragic. Every time you think about it, you think, how could this have been in our Constitution? How could this been a start for such a great country? But they came to the convention and they said, hey, we need the political power that comes with holding slaves, that comes with enslaving people, but we're not gonna let them vote. So what do we do about it? And what the convention decided was, well, for purposes of representation, they would count each enslaved person as 3/5 of a white individual for purposes of apportioning the House of Representatives and counting the population. Now, you asked it in the context of a discussion of the Electoral College, because what most people don't realize is that trickles down into it. And the reason is that the way we decide how many electoral votes a state gets is by adding up the senators plus House of Representatives.
Right.
And the total of the House of Representatives from 1787 until the Civil War was affected by this compromise, where the South get these bonus sort of electoral votes because they are counting enslaved people as 3/5 of a white person, but not letting them vote. So it's really insidious. It's sort of a backdoor into the Electoral College, but it is there.
Right. So they, in some ways, Southern states might have an outsized representation when it comes to the Electoral College. Or not enough.
What it actually does is it gives them a boost, right? That's the irony. The really tragic irony is that the South is in a way wanting to count enslaved people the most. They don't want 3/5, they want 4/5, they want 1 out of 1. Why? Because they're not gonna let them vote. So it's almost like, if you get 3/5, you get 1.6 votes for every white person. If you get 1 out of 1, you get double your bonus. It's really, it's horrible to think about, right? Now, to be clear, it's racist math. To be clear, that was eliminated in 1865 by the Civil Rights Amendments and as the Civil War Amendments, right? Which abolished slavery and wrote the 3/5 compromise out of the Constitution.
Yes.
But it persists, right? Because what you're talking about is and trust me, I've gone back and looked at way too many debates about what was happening in the early convention. But when you read it,
more than just watching Hamilton, right?
More than watching Hamilton, as great as it is, more than watching Hamilton. And let me tell you, these things, they're not like sung, they don't rhyme. It's much harder to read. But when you do read it, you realize that they actually discussed having a popular vote even back in 1787. But what you're talking about meant that it was really hard to get to, because James Madison, the sort of king of the convention, he recognized, hey, the Southern states will never go for a popular vote because then they'd have to let the enslaved people vote, right? If you're just counting up votes, there aren't enough only white people.
Right.
And so
applying
that was just
that today. Right. And then seeing how the Civil Rights Act has been gutted and the Voting Rights Act have been gutted, and so many of these same states, right, former Confederate states, are now trying to suppress the vote in any way they can. You can see why there's pushback against the popular vote, which I want to talk to you about. Why try to fix the Electoral College? Why not just have a popular vote? Can it be fixed?
Yeah. It's a great question, and why we're calling this initiative Fix the College is that we do think it can be fixed, because the key problem with it is something that each individual state is doing on its own, which is awarding its electors to whoever wins the popular vote, even by 1. Right, so 2016, Donald Trump narrowly wins Wisconsin. He gets all of the electors. In 2016, over 4 million people voted for Donald Trump in California. Their votes were thrown out, right? They were totally ignored. So I think if you change that mechanism and maybe have a few additional tweaks to the Electoral College, like let fractional votes so that we can accurately capture, if someone wins 55% to 45%, let's have 5.5 electoral votes and 4.5 electoral votes, if they have 10 electoral votes in a state. That just sort of gives everyone that equal say that we all should have when we elect the president. So I think there are ways to fix it.
Right, and is it also that it's easier to fix the Electoral College than, let's say, amend the Constitution and have a a popular vote? Like, is it sort of a path of least resistance question as well?
It can be, and some of these fixes that we're talking about might be constitutional amendments, the ones that are maybe a little more bipartisan or easier to swallow than a full popular vote. Like you could imagine amending the Constitution where you still give small states that little kind of bonus. You keep electors, but you make them fractional or something like that. So there's a lot of creative solutions. What we want to do is really talk about it because people don't get enough sort of civic discourse and ability to have their voice heard and keep people talking about it in an engaged and fair way rather than just slogans. So that's what we're trying to do.
And tell us then, this campaign, Fix the College, you're actually doing it democratically yourselves. Quickly, how are you going about this process?
Yeah, so we're gonna partner really quickly with some folks that are doing this amazing work in America and around the country with these platforms to help people of diverse backgrounds have constructive conversations. No yelling, no name calling, no slogans. And the Electoral College is a nice, discrete topic to talk about that. And it's a great way to educate people and have some fun too.
Awesome, Jason Harrow, Attorney, Executive Director of Equal Citizens. Check out their work, check out Fix the College, get involved. And thank you so much for this important work. I wish it happened before this November, oh my God.
Till next, it's a long, hard slog, but I'm really optimistic that we can change the way we elect the president. No one likes it, so how can we not change it?
Agreed, thank you, Jason.
On the go, don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.